You weren't supposed to see that. I'm sorry. Thank you for the intro. Hi, my name is Fred K. Schott. And as mentioned, I co-created Astro with a bunch of other smart people, and I'm excited to share it with you all today. Astro is a really exciting framework that we've been working really hard on over the last year. So there's a lot of cool stuff to dig into. I've got some slides. I've got a cool demo. Hopefully the live coding gods smile upon us, but always something that happens. So we'll roll the dice and see what goes on. I have some slides here. I think they'll come up. There they are. Great. If this is your first time hearing about Astro, that's very, very understandable. We are kind of the new kids on the block. Only been around for about a year, still in our beta phase. But like Remix that Chancellors gave an awesome talk on, like Next, like SvelteKit, like Gatsby, we are a framework for building websites. So you can think of it as one of those. It's a framework Storyblok conference, mini conference. Of course, that's why we're here. I would say, and I'll just kind of plant the seed at the start of the talk, and let's see if it pays off. You can also think of Astro like a Rails or a WordPress or Laravel, in that we're really focused on the server-side HTML part of the story. This seems to be a trend that we like to think that we kicked off, but at the very least, it's really been building over the last year that more things should happen on the server, especially with really cool edge technologies that lean the servers closer to your users. We're trying to capitalize on all of that and have really designed a framework from the ground up around that idea. Of course, this is a Storyblok theme. There is this idea of working with your favorite CMS that we are really excited about, and I'll talk a bit about our kind of content focus that pairs really nicely with a CMS like Storyblok. But even in our kind of early beta phase, we already have some awesome users at companies like Google and IKEA and Rocked and The Guardian and a bunch of others. In so little time, it's just been amazing seeing it kind of explode in growth. And we're just doing our best to keep up with the awesome things our users are doing. For example, this was a really cool launch from a couple months ago. Here's Astro powering the official Firebase blog, which just has been really cool to work with that team on that. And you can see I kind of shimmied the little lighthouse scores in the bottom right. Amazing performance story to boot. So performance is something we really care about. It was mentioned in the intro. I'll talk a bit about what we mean by that, because everyone cares about performance, but we really take the performance side of things story. We want, the performance side of things seriously. We really want it to be this best-in-class performance. You don't have to be an expert in performance to get the best out of Astro. It all should come for free. That's one of our main ideas, and I'll show you what I mean by that as we go on. A couple things that make Astro stand out. One of them, kind of the biggest one, is that we don't tie you to a single framework. So I saw in the comments someone being like, oh, Remix looks cool. I wish as a Vue developer I could use it. We have this idea of letting anyone bring their own framework so that we don't lock you into a single one. It's this really cool idea that is, again, that kind of like WordPressy Rails, like, you can build a site without tying someone into a single framework by becoming the foundation that they can build on top of. So we provide the routing, the server side of things. You can build with your favorite front end of choice on the UI side of things. And we will do a really good job, more than any of those other kind of older players like WordPress and Rails do, of bringing it together into an experience that feels super modern. So it should feel like a Next.js or a Remix, but you can bring your favorite framework and you're not going to be paying the complexity cost of React all the way down the server, or Svelte all the way down the server. Use it on the front end because that's what it's great at, without paying that overall cost. I mentioned prioritizing server rendering HTML. And what that means is that we're really talking about SSR rendering HTML. If you want to really boil it down, it's like the old MPA versus SPA debate, right? Should your site be a full JavaScript application, or should your site be many pages of HTML? I don't really think that there's a right or wrong answer there. That's kind of a false way to present it. But I think there's a right and wrong answer for different use cases, in that based on your needs, one of them is going to perform better for your users, help you meet your goals. If you're Facebook, you probably don't want, you want to be thinking in terms of a giant application. But if you're a recipe blog, maybe you just want to get that HTML to the user as quickly as possible. So we really focus on that story above all else. Mention the first load experience is something we really care about. And the way we do it, which I'll talk about in a second, is just by reducing the overall JS payload. Auto magically, you can say. This idea of actually helping you remove JavaScript from your page so that you're not shipping your entire site as a JavaScript application to the user, we're actually stripping out the things that are static so that you can focus on only shipping down JavaScript to power the dynamic parts of your site. So your layout component that you wanted to use, your favorite framework to build, totally cool. We're going to do the work to make sure that it's static HTML. Means we don't need any JavaScript, means your users don't have to pay the cost to ship that and load it on their maybe low-powered mobile device. That's something that's really hard to get right. And I think that's our big claim to fame. It's kind of what unlocked this whole story that Astro is able to tell. We were one of the first frameworks to actually support this idea of partially hydrating your site based on your needs. I'll talk about that in a little bit more, but these are some quotes that I love, just kind of showing what this impact is on real sites. So you have Theo, who's this awesome streamer working on a project called Ping. You have Jason Lengstorff from many things, mainly Netlify, doing some awesome DevRel stuff there. And you can just see how huge this impact is when you start to really look at the numbers. When you're not shipping your whole site that you used to build and render HTML, you don't have to then double up and send it down to the client. If you've heard React Server Components, this is that idea, but available today and also supported on any framework. It's not just a React coming soon feature. So I talked about this first load experience and the idea that right and wrong isn't really a universal thing. It's really about your use case. And I think this is what sets Astro apart from the other frameworks that I mentioned. We really care about content-focused websites, mainly content websites, I like to call them. And the idea is that if you really care about getting content to the user, Astro wants to be the best way to build that kind of site. I've posted this on Twitter before, and kind of this is the framework that I like to use to think about sites, is that every site can kind of fall somewhere along the spectrum. It's a spectrum, so not everything is perfectly captured in all five, but I think a lot of them are. And the other thing that people really like calling out on Twitter, one site can be many of these things, right? You can have your marketing and your app for the logged in user both living on the same domain. So think of this more as about like when I go to upload a page, what is the point of that page? What is my goal as a person building? What is the user's goal? What's the point of all this? The way that we see it is that we are really focused on the left side of the spectrum, the content focused side. So if you're building a site where its main goal is to get something in front of the user as quickly as possible, that's Astro. Compare that to like a Figma, right? It's a full application, or like a video game running in the browser. That's very different. You can sacrifice some performance for the overall kind of lifespan of the user on your site. But if you're an e-commerce site, right, like there is direct data comparing the speed at which your site loads to the amount of money you make at the end of the day, the number of customers that you convert. E-commerce is a huge part of the web, and we really see our job as taking the bare principles from the content focused and bringing them right. So we started with purely static and we added SSR later. We've been really keeping the simplicity and the performance story solid as we grow kind of left to right down this spectrum. Compare that to like a Next.js, for example, really started on the right and worked their way left. So you can see this in like Next Export is how they do static sites, but it's this kind of secondary path. Not all features work for it. We really are trying to push a new idea here, which is that a great site for a content use case can kind of start from those basic principles that work for static sites, and we can add features as we go without sacrificing performance, simplicity, the things that make Jamstack and static sites really, really powerful. So I mentioned kind of this auto magical removing of JavaScript, and I'll just touch on this really quickly. How can we claim that? Like, isn't that everyone says less JavaScript is good, right? What we can do is we can actually deliver on that promise by taking a new approach to how we hydrate your page. So without going too deep, if you look at this little example that I borrowed from a builder.io blog post, you can see this kind of e-commerce page. It's got a lot of dash lines, but it's basically trying to, here's your product, here's some things. Cart and add cart are the two dynamic parts of this page. If you're and again, Next.js is awesome. This is not me at all ragging, but it's a really good example of the other side of the spectrum. If you're Next.js, what you're going to do as a technology is render this whole page into HTML on the server. That's great. Gives you that HTML to the user faster. That's great. But then what it has to do is ship then your whole app that rendered that page so that it can run on the client. You saw Chance doing some of this stuff with loaders and actions. A lot of that is to make sure that when this gets to the client, it also then loads and runs as an application. So the header, the product, everything, even if it's static, has to be shipped as a React component in one of those projects, because that's the promise of these isomorphic. It runs in both places. It's a cool feature if you need it, But our take is that most people don't need that complexity, because what we can give you instead is really, really fast performance by stripping that out. So when Astro sees this page, instead of shipping your whole page to the user as React, even if you built it all with React, what Astro's going to do is see that most of it's static, strip out the JavaScript, and then only hydrate the cart and the add cart button. These are the two things that are dynamic. So we're going to ship them down almost like they're little mini React apps running on your page. It's not all one big JavaScript application. It's little islands of interactivity. So partial hydration, island architecture, you might have heard these terms before. It's really, really cool way to build a site that feels a lot like something that really works for a content site where you care about performance and shipping as little as possible. The layout component, that doesn't need to be JavaScript. It's a layout. It's static. This is not a feature that you can add easily, right? This is something that we have taken from, again, back to principles. How does Astro build your site? How do you tell Astro what to build? We focused on this feature and built out from it, and it's really paid off for something that I consider really unique in the space. Doing something that is not just a kind of clone of what others have done before. We're really bringing something new to the space, which is what makes me so excited about it. The idea here is that partial hydration, if you go back and look at how others have talked about in the past, it's hard to implement, difficulty, and not gaining traction, all these things that made it kind of unsuitable or not recommended for most. Because frameworks kind of fought with you on it, Astro makes it easy. If you've seen kind of like client directives that Quick is experimenting with, there's a new Deno framework called Fresh that is borrowing this idea. Isles, which is another Vue take on this. There's all these different frameworks that are borrowing this idea that we kind of pushed out there and made popular. So it's really cool seeing, as when you build anything, right? Was this a good idea? It's been really cool seeing others growing and building on what we brought out there. And it's probably been one of my favorite parts of this. So we're super excited about this idea. It's really unique. It's really good for content-focused websites. So marketing, static sites, e-commerce is really where we're trying to make sure we can kind of move right on that spectrum. And I think my next slide is a demo. So let's just jump into it. I'm going to have to change kind of screen share. So everyone give me 1 second. You can maybe play some hold music as I go. Beautiful. Move that out of the way. Great. I've got this nice little VS Code editor. Someone in the chat tell me if you can't see anything. If it's too small, I have a habit of doing that. Chance and I got into a huge heated debate, not about frameworks, but about left versus right sidebars. So I'm a purist. I'm a left sidebar for life kind of person. Please no one get mad at me in the comments for it. What we have here is just a simple repo. You can see there's nothing in here. And what I'm going to do, I don't have a cool to-do list to show you. I just wanted to run through a couple of features, give you basically a whirlwind of Astro so that you can learn and see it for yourself and maybe go and learn more if you want. I'll just call this out as astro.build is our website. So you can see our cool 80s vaporwave kind of vibe going on. You can go here for everything. So we have a cool showcase that shows you all the great sites that are built with Astro. You can check out themes, integrations, documentation, the whole thing. Given just a call out for that if you want to learn more. This is not something you need to see yet because I wanted to make sure it all worked. But we're basically going to generate this as our really basic default site. So what we have here is a really cool command called npm create. And we've built the Astro kind of create Astro package to support it. I like to add at latest just because I'm always running this and sometimes npm gets weird and you don't need to do that. But I do because my computer runs it a lot. This is just going to walk you through creating an Astro site. So we're going to do a couple of things here for the purpose of the demo that I'll kind of call out as maybe not what you're going to want to do. For example, I want to create this in my current directory. So I'm just going to use the dot to kind of represent current directory. I'd really recommend just the basics as your starter template. I'll make this a bit bigger. It's kind of like this cool, just really basic, gives you a couple architectural decisions that we recommend. For the purpose of this, and I'll call it blog, docs, portfolio. We have a couple of really cool use case-based templates that I'd really recommend checking out if that's what you're building for. But for the demo today, I'm just going to do it completely empty. We're going to start from scratch. I'll kind of walk you through it. I'll be your guided mentor, tutor as we go. There's some cool stuff here. Let's run npm install. Let's install some packages. Shout out to this awesome gradient, which is probably spent more time on than we should have. but obviously paying off dividends here for this demo. You can see it creating your node modules directory and a bunch of other stuff, which we will get to in a second. Astro Add is a really cool feature that I will get to later. So hold that thought. We're just going to say no for right now. And initializing a Git repo. Normally I would say do this, but for VS Code, it gets all green and it kind of tries to help you out and it gets in the way for a demo. So I'm just going to say no. CD into the directory, we're already here. And now we can run npm run dev to start the dev server. All right. Hopefully everyone is still here because that is what generated this Astro. So Times New Roman, the word Astro, that's it. I'm going to shrink this down so it takes up a little less room. I'm going to move this over so we get a little more room. All right, hopefully that's good. So let's talk about an Astro project and what does it look like? We have two folders here, source and public. Public is just for static assets. We're not going to touch these. We're just going to ship them with your site. So you want a favicon, put it in public. We're not going to touch it. Source is where we kind of take ownership of your site. So it's a source directory. You can structure this however you want. We're really not opinionated. There are a couple of things we recommend. The only directory that's really kind of like magic is the pages directory. So if you use Next.js or saw in the demo right before this with Remix, it's like our routing file-based router directory. The things that you put in pages are going to become your routes based on their file name. The other thing that you're probably noticing right now is the .astro syntax. What is that? What's going on? We have our own syntax for creating the basic structure of your site. It's just HTML. So the kind of secret of it is anything that is valid HTML is valid Astro. So you can see here, we kind of put a comment, this is HTML for real. The site didn't break. We didn't kind of break our syntax highlighting. It's just HTML. So this is something really unique to what we're doing here. The basics of it, right, is that we're not a way to kind of call a function and render React and here's your JSX syntax and make sure your things are all hooked up properly. It's at the end of the day, our foundation is just static HTML. But we love a lot of the things of the modern web development experience. So thinking in components and JSX syntax, the idea of mixing expressions with your markup. These are all things we really do care about. So Astro syntax, you can kind of think of it as like take the best from Svelte, from Vue, from React, and try to combine them into something new that's really focused on that server rendering story. So for us, server rendering, what are we optimizing for? For one is we love JSX, so let's bring in that idea of an expression, right? So you can kind of let's multi-cursor this and let's turn these into some JSX expressions. All right, Astro is still working. I can say still here, still working. So this is JSX, right? You have your kind of curly brackets. Svelte supports this as well. We do the same. The thing that is kind of the most Astro about this is that we make this separation between logic that runs in the server and templating. So literally, I'm doing a line here. It's because we literally use the front matter syntax to dictate this. Or dash dash dash. Your server code goes here. So same thing at the end of the day, HTML, but you now have this kind of place where you can write some server code that's going to run when your page gets generated. So the most basic thing we could do, right, is const message equals hello Astro. Take that and then let's replace these with that expression. There you go. So we're using this code, we're running it when you server into your site, and then the template is able to pull from those variables, expressions, whatever you did, that work is going to kind of translate one-to-one. It's this really cool idea of optimizing for the server render, where if you think of what React and Svelte and every one of those frameworks, they started on the front end, right? So they had to be built around concepts like reactivity. How do you update the DOM? How do you translate these kinds of changes really in this clever way? Whereas we can kind of take it from the other side of things, like there's no reactivity on the server, right? There's no use state when you're thinking about how do I render this HTML? Because once it's shipped to the user, the server washes its hands of it. So for us, we get to kind of design from these principles around much more simplicity. For example, you don't see any function here. There's no return that you need to worry about. We're literally able to do this thing like run this code and then output this HTML. So it's super, super nice. The other cool thing, I mentioned the multi-framework support, right? I like React. I'm personally usually using React. So let's show what that looks like because it really integrates well with this story. I'm going to pull back up my terminal here. I'm going to quit the dev server, and I'm going to run that Astro add command that I showed off earlier. So that would be npx to kind of call into Astro as package add, and there's a bunch of cool stuff. I'm just going to say React because I know that that's what I want to add. You can run just Astro add, and it's going to actually we'll do that. Why not? It's going to show you all these kind of cool prompts that we like. So you can see all these great frameworks that we support. Let's choose React. We've got Tailwind, TurboLinks, PartyTown. We don't really want to do that right now, so let's just kind of skip over that one. It's going to walk us through some config changes that's going to make automatically, and that's going to install these packages. So if we restart now, we have React support. We aren't using React, so there's nothing to show, but it's there. Let's prove it out now. We're going to create a new folder for components. And let's create just a simple counter in React. So counter.jsx. Now, I am a very lazy developer. I don't want to have to go and build this myself. So I'm going to do React counter. And I believe they have a great example that you can just pull right from their docs. All right, so I'm on the official React docs. I'm copying this component. We're going to make a couple changes, and then we're going to see it in action. So that other people can see it. Counter, and we'll make it the default so that it is available. All right, still nothing's happened yet. Don't worry. This idea of Astro being, you're routing your pages, your basic HTML baseline, allows you to then bring in React when you need something dynamic. So in this case, we can actually import it into our Astro component, or our page rather, and then use it like a component. So this is kind of that Svelter view single file component idea where this is essentially your jumping off point for whatever it is you want to build. So we're going to say import counter from out of here, components, counter.jsx. All right, we're still good. Everything's working. Nothing's on the page yet. And we're just going to put it right under this message here. All right, so just like that, I've brought React into my project. I mentioned that we support, oh God, there's so much cool things. Okay, React counter, here it is. I'll call out the first kind of most important thing to know when you're doing this, because right now, if you look at the page, you're going to see a little JavaScript. It's all dev server stuff. If I ship this to the user, there wouldn't be a single JavaScript thing running right now, all static. So our default, right, is super static, super low JavaScript because we're stripping everything out that isn't needed. But it's on you as the user to tell us when something's needed. So for example, this is a counter, it's interactive. If I click this right now, it looks broken, right? We need to tell Astro that this is something. The comments are like, click it, you have to click it. Nothing's going on. This is something that we make really explicit. You need to tell Astro when something is interactive. And you can see it's already being auto-suggested here. We do that with client directive. So you can see a couple here. We'll just take the most basic one, which is client load. We'll save. That refreshes the browser. And we have interactivity. So we've told Astro this is a thing that needs to load with the page. This is important. Load it. We're going to click it a lot. You might have seen some other ones here, and I'll just call out some of these because they're really, really cool. Idle is going to only run it and actually literally load it, hydrate it, and then be ready on the page after the page is idle. So I don't know if anyone follows Ryan Carniato. He is the creator of Solid. I'll have to go back and find this video, but we did a live stream together where he's like, all right, I have this Hacker News demo that no framework has ever succeeded, and I'm going to put Astro to this is not how he sounds, but basically he had a page with 1,000 different comment nodes, right? Each one like a solid component. And just by switching from client load to client idle, that went from like a 40 Lighthouse score because it's running so much JavaScript to hydrate all those comments to I think like a 92, 93, 94. The idea is that if something isn't essential, you can literally tell Astro, hey, this counter, it's not that important, right? This is something that like we don't really care about. If the user, I mean, click me is pretty enticing, right? If the user clicked that, it was broken. I would say this is weirdly very important. But if it's like some sort of image carousel and it has a really nice basic HTML, like you don't really need it to load immediately, right? Especially if it's super heavy. So this is a really powerful feature of Astro that is really unique to what we're doing, where you can tell Astro, how important and essential something is to load, and Astro will then optimize your site based on that. I'll call out probably my favorite one of these because there's a few, but client visible is probably my favorite one. So this is going to, oh, and how great is that HMR too? It's just silently doing all this work behind the scenes. Let me put in some white space to show you all what I'm talking about. Lots of white space. Don't make fun of me for this. I can still see. I'll just zoom in. Still use the breakpoint element all the time. All the time. All right. So nothing up my sleeve. Let me pull this open so y'all can see it. Network tabs here. Okay. So in case you forgot, client visible is the thing. I'm sure you all already know what's going to happen, but it's still super cool. We've cleared out the network panel. And as we scroll down here, nothing loaded, 0.js, 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 boom, JavaScript. So client visible is like probably the most powerful one. It literally says like, hey, this isn't super essential. It's so actually non-essential. Just load it when it comes into view. Get ahead of the user a little bit. But if this is kind of way down the page, don't even bother. This is really, really powerful. Again, imagine that kind of like multi-component world, or sorry, 1,000 comments, right? You only really need to hydrate if there's some interactivity, the ones that are in view, right? If someone doesn't scroll 1,000 comments deep, why pay the cost? This is probably one of the most powerful features to demo because it just kind of really hits home this idea that you are totally in control of your performance. There's a bunch more to hit on here, which I think I'm running low on time. I'm just going to kind of wrap up here with a couple of final thoughts. The big one is this idea of simplicity. Like we're targeting a component or a content-driven site, which means we're really just trying to make it as simple as possible to get your content to your users. So not just from a performance standpoint, but literally from a how much you need to learn. We know we're saying here's a new file extension, so we've already kind of eaten into our complexity budget with just that idea alone. So what we're trying to pitch is like literally the actual front matter here is super simple. There's no function, there's no exports to worry about, save for one that's kind of going away. So really effectively, there's nothing to worry about there. We're just going to run your code from top to bottom. Do what you need to do. If you need to exit out of it to send a 500 error, just return a 500. Like there's all these just really simple things where a lot of other frameworks will have to, will make sure you import this helper that returns this type of thing. I'll just kind of call out our doc site, which has a lot of awesome references and different things. There's this Astro global, which just kind of gives you everything you need. So for example, you need the current URL, you can grab it from here. You can grab data or even set data on the response object. You can grab your site. There's just all this really cool stuff that's built in so that you can really think of your script as like when this page loads, we run from top to bottom. There's not a lot of kind of indirection or kind of running around to power this because all we care about is render this HTML. And then those components that you've built are going to do the lifting of what happens next. You can totally hydrate a form. You can build an entire SPA. One of my favorite things that you can do is literally if you're a marketing site that has a pretty simple logged in experience, you could literally just do like my admin console, right? Just have it be one giant React app if that's what you want to do. Your marketing site, have your kind of one component that owns the whole body. You can totally do that right into React, right into Vue. It's really, really flexible and super powerful due to that flexibility. The last thing I'll show, and I'll just kind of call it this awesome site, astro.new. It's kind of a great jumping off point. It has all those demos I mentioned, just the basics, the empty one that we started from, including a bunch of framework ones. So just really, really lots of jumping off points based on what you want to build. My favorite is the kitchen sink, kind of lovingly called, oh, I've already ruined the surprise. You can see me playing around with this. I mentioned you can support React, Svelte, and Vue. Probably the wildest thing that we do is we support all of them on the same page. Hashtag micro front ends, hashtag micro frameworks. You can see here's a React counter living right next to a Preact counter, living right next to a solid counter, living right next to a Vue counter, living right next to a Svelte counter. It just kind of the list, actually the list doesn't go on, that's it. But this idea of letting different frameworks own their islands means that you can really break down and kind of step Astro out of that story and just let you build what you want to build with the framework you love. We can support these. There's even some wild stuff you can do with nesting a view counter inside of a React counter, or replace your favorite framework for those names. I won't get into that here, but it's just super flexible in what it lets you do. This might not make a lot of sense for a demo or getting started, but if you think of your company, like a big company or a small company or anyone who's been locked into a framework before or tried to support two different teams building with different technologies, that's something that's really hard to do. Again, Next.js, incredible software. You're choosing React, right? You're betting on React, and you can't just switch that out easily. When Solid.js launched, Solid kind of the new take on JSX and React on the block. When they launched, we were one of the first ways to build with Solid because it was just another pluggable framework for us. So if you were a team that had been building with React and all of a sudden you want to try out Solid, you don't have to go start a new greenfield project. You can literally spin up a page with Solid, or even just a single component to try it out. If you're an enterprise, right, or support multiple teams, one team can be building with React, another with Vue, but as an organization, you're not like having to support Next and every one of these server running, right? You need expertise in those. Astro is the foundation. It's one way to run a server, build as a website without making you lock into a single UI framework. So pick your favorites, mix and match if you need to. You'll only pay the cost of what it costs to load those frameworks in multiple places. So this kitchen sink I wouldn't recommend because you're going to pay the cost for React, Preact, Solid, Vue, Svelte. But if you're a team and you need to do a migration, or one page is powered by one, Svelte, Preact, these are pretty lightweight. You can get away with a lot there. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. There's a ton more here. Again, I'll just kind of call out astro.build is the site. Our Discord community is awesome. Astro.build has a link to it, or astro.build/chat is the URL. Everyone's super active there. I see a couple people in chat from our community. Hi, y'all. It's awesome. I would definitely recommend checking that out because we just have a really, really cool community that I'm super proud of. We are working towards our V1, so we're in beta right now, as I mentioned. V1 coming later in July. So now's a great time to test the wheels, kick the tires. Again, we've got awesome companies already building production sites with Astro. So it's not at all too early as we get these final releases together for our V1. And yes, it works with all your CMSs. I didn't even show like running fetch in that front matter, but you can talk to Storyblok, you can talk to CMSs. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. If Storyblok wants to work on an integration or a demo together, would love to do that because we're just starting to really kind of push the limits on those things. So anyway, I've been rambling. I've been talking. Thank you all for listening. Astro.build is the website. Please check it out, and thank you for listening.